Hey everyone, welcome back to Canton Insiders, the quick podcast show by Catholics by Intellect EU, where we sit down with the people actually building, operating, and reshaping the Canton Network. I'm Bohdan, and today's guest runs a company with one of more interesting bets in the Canton ecosystem, building data infrastructure. So, as you know, Canton's selling point is privacy by default. Yet there is a clear, real demand, and we see it from our side as well, from Catholics, for clean, structured, reportable data from the institutions actually running on the canton. And solving that without breaking the privacy model is, I would say, quite hard. We will we'll hear the thoughts from Ben on it. So I'm joined today by Ben Roy. He's the co-founder and CEO of Noves. Noves was recently approved as a Canton featured app with their CC browser, and the Canton Data App now powers visibility for over than 100 validators, applications, and partners on the network. Ben, welcome to the Canton Insiders.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Yeah, happy to have you. I have one opener question for you. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you ended up building the blockchain data infrastructure in the first place?
Yeah, sure. I've been around blockchain for a long time as an investor and a trader. And back in DeFi summer, with all the craziness that was going on, we were talking to a number of different groups about how to get the information about their trading activities into more traditional platforms, like for fund management and stuff like that. And we're quite shocked that we were being told that for managing tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, that the proper flow was to send a spreadsheet with a list of trading activities, and then they would have humans type these values into management systems. And it was incomprehensible to me that we would take perfect blockchain data from an immutable source and then insert people in the middle of it and introduce all the possibilities of issues and mistakes and stuff like that just to get it into another system. And so we started tackling the problem of how do we effectively take data from blockchain and move that into more traditional finance systems where we can do all the things that we need to do with it, like report on it and audit it and that sort of thing.
When I heard this from you, that's really makes sense, and I don't know how it could be the way that it's shared in spreadsheets. And touching on to other things that you could do with data, what actually Novus helps you to achieve, or what Novus helps you to do today with your data on the blockchain? You started with the public chain, so it was like Ethereum, Solana, and now you are deeply focused on Canton. If you want to touch it on the public chain sides, you can start from this, but I'm mostly interested to hear about Canton.
Yeah, I mean, I think that as you say, we're primarily focused on Canton right now because, like you mentioned in the intro, Canton presents a whole new set of challenges that you don't see on the public chains. And we're tackling those problems. But even on public chains, it's difficult to get the data that you need to make sure that it's accurate and to really transform it into something that's easy to work with. And I think that the sort of core thing is that blockchain data is it has multiple layers of the data all commingled. So you have like the technical implementation of the data, plus you have the meaning of the data kind of jammed into the same layer. And it's left to everybody to sort of like figure out which pieces mean what or how to do anything with that. And so the core problem that we started out by solving is producing a data stream that is complete, that's accurate, and that has some sort of meaning. And a big part of our core tech was contextualizing the data in a way that makes it easy to use for primarily financial reporting was really our big focus, although we have people that use it for other types of things as well. But anybody that wants to integrate blockchain data but doesn't want to spend their entire life just building interpreters and things like that to sort of figure out what the data is, that's kind of like the problem that we solve. We do that one time so that people can actually focus on whatever it is that they're trying to build. In Canton, You have, of course, the problem of privacy, which is like we can't just index this data. You can't just go get all the data and then let people query for what they want, which is how basically all the other chains work. And so for us, we had to approach that from a different perspective. And we kind of had to invert the model. And instead of building one big central indexer, what we did is we built a tool that is installable alongside each individual validator that runs inside the security context of that validator and that's able to index the private data that it can access from that security context to allow access the same way that you would normally get from a public indexing offering, but private to your data. And then on top of that, to do all of that without sending any of it to us, right? Because people don't want us in the flow. They don't want us to have visibility into their data, which presents a whole new set of challenges because, we're not there. We can't see what's happening. We can't see what might be going on or try to like debug what's happening because we're not in the flow of that data. So it's definitely like a whole different approach and a whole different set of challenges for us there.
With all the love to Canton, I think for you as a data infrastructure team, Canton makes the life much, much harder than it was like on public chains. And maybe from on top of your mind, what were the biggest challenges that you faced being building data infrastructure for the Canton?
I don't think we have enough time to go through all of them, so I'll probably just try to highlight a couple. But certainly one, I think when we started, which was last summer, it doesn't seem that long ago, but pretty early, I think, from a Canton perspective. One of the challenges we faced was just there was a lot of it was difficult to find good information. Documentation was pretty thin. It's certainly better now than it was. It's still difficult. And so even trying to work your way through like how things worked or why things are a certain way or just finding the answers was certainly reasonably more difficult than it might be in something like Ethereum where you've got a decade of documentation and just like so many example use cases and I think along with that Canton really we're having to rebuild so many things and by we I mean the whole community is having to
Hmm.
rebuild things that are well established. There's already so many like primitives and base libraries and all these kinds of things around Ethereum that just don't exist yet in Canton. And so there's a lot of reblazing trails where we kind of know what we need, but we're used to having a thing to do it. And here you've just got to build it from scratch or figure it out yourself. And then the second thing for us, so like on a public chain like Ethereum, we have all kinds of automated systems that constantly pull arbitrary data from the chain and evaluate what we're seeing and how it looks and do we have proper coverage and do we understand what it is and then we can kick off processes to implement interpreters and all the things that we need. In Canton, most of the apps we can't even see. There's no way for us to just proactively fetch the data and build what we need. We're in a much more reactive way where someone's installed the app and they all of a sudden have transactions for some app that we don't have that we don't know about. And so those things don't show up correctly in their version of the app. And that total lack of visibility puts us back on our heels where we like to be able to be out in front of things and to try to build things before people come across it. And here we're stuck just reacting to it. And it's a very different thing. And it's a thing where we want to be out trying to talk to people who are building apps before they release them or as they release them. Because if we can get in that flow, we can get some visibility and then we can have things prepared so that when our customers actually come across it, things are already prepped and working the way that they would want it to.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. And seems you're having the success on the Canton network with apps. That's like what from what I see from the public and from what we hear from our customers at Intellect.eu and Catholics. So, and you recently, congrats, you got approved as a Canton featured app. You are now serving more than 100 validators on Canton with data layer. The ecosystem is pretty much aware of how the Novus Canton Data App looks like from the inside. But for the new people watching us and deciding on joining as a validator, maybe Can you show us the quick walkthrough of the offerings and the products that you have? So I spin up a validator and connect the Canton Data App. What do I see? Why is it useful for me?
Yeah, so normally when you spin up the validator out of the box, you do get some kind of an interface that shows up, some sort of a really basic wallet. I emphasize really basic. When we first fired our validator up, it was like we have no ability to see anything about what's actually going on, and the wallet's extremely rudimentary. So I would say that what we're trying to deliver with the data app out of the box is an experience that improves what it's like to operate a node. When people come into the data app for the first time, what we're looking to do is provide them with a better ops experience so that they can understand what's happening with their node. They can find transactions. If you try to use the default app to figure out something that you sent to someone a week ago, it's basically impossible to do something like that or just have general visibility. So inside the data app, if you want to search for a particular transaction or if you want to see, only a particular type of transaction, we have basic filtering and searching and sorting. It just lets you have a better sense that you understand what is going on and that you can kind of keep your arms around what's going on with your node, because otherwise you sort of have to build everything from scratch. And so, yeah, for any particular transaction, just give you the details as plainly as we can of what's going on, and whether that's data that you would normally be able to see, like this particular transaction, you could see on a public explorer. But if you had private token transfers, if you were working with other assets, or if you were using any kind of an app or a protocol that's not public, you'd still be able to see all of that data here. We also have an improved wallet experience that's built in. So basic things like an address book to make sure that you aren't firing off assets to the
Mm.
wrong party or that kind of thing. We have those sorts of capabilities. We have things like alerts and streaming. So like if you want to be able to get an email alert or something like that, anytime that a balance hits a particular threshold, you can choose to set what you want that balance to be, and then you can pick, how you want that to be delivered, whether that's email or Slack messages or that sort of thing. And then the last, I guess, big piece is we have a fairly robust set of exports that you can use to take your data out to accounting systems. You can't really, if you use QuickBooks or something like that, you can't bring a million transactions and import it because it will actually crash the system. So we will roll those things up for financials. You can get, more technical, lower level exports and that type of thing. The data app also, everything that we have in the UI is actually built on top of an API layer that's available. So
Mhm.
you can integrate into any of the pieces that you want. If something isn't the way you want it to be, or if there's some capability you need, you can integrate directly into the data app to get whatever it is that you want out of the tool. And then I'd also just highlight, we just launched our public data studio where we're surfacing a bunch of data. There's, some basic things like this. We run a dashboard for featured apps to sort of show where the apps are falling in terms of their compliance. Just a little bit wider so we can see here. So this helps apps sort of monitor where they're at relative to where they should be in terms of
Mhm.
the rewards that they're earning, and to make sure that they're complying with the guidelines from tokenomics. And we provide in-depth breakdowns of like how that's calculated. We, publish exactly the calculations of how we get to that, really in an effort to provide maximum transparency for people so they understand exactly where the numbers are coming from, and make it easy for the foundation as well as participants to kind of understand what's going on with those things. And then interesting and kind of like in-depth stuff like our flows, financial flows, so you can see where all the funds are coming from and where those funds are going to for any party that's on the network.
That's that looks amazing, both the private data layer, what you see on your validator, and the public one. I will link it down in the description for everyone to play with it. So thank you, Ben.
Excellent.
That's a really nice
Yes.
product promo, I think, and the product is great. So there is a fit. I'm just wondering for everyone listening, we are working right now on the integration and partnership with the Noves Data App. So it's soonish.
Yes.
It soonish will be available
Soonish.
for the validator that are running with Catalyx blockchain manager, the Noves Data App will be available to natively integrate and monitor all of this beautiful data that we saw. So stay tuned for that. We will probably do some public announcement when it's live. And on the kind of infrastructure provider point of view, so we operate some validators on the Canton Network, and you powers the data layer for kind of the similar slice of the network. We are effectively serving the same clients from the different layers of the infrastructure stack. From your side, from the kind of insider side, are there any gaps right now in the ecosystem?
Certainly, yes. I think that, I mean, even our tool, which I think is amazing, still, we still have like pieces of it that aren't where we want them to be yet. And I think that kind of like we talked about earlier, there's just like so many basic elements that aren't fully built and aren't fully ready for people. But I think more than that, even we're still missing content and information. I had a conversation probably not even a month ago with someone who helps consult with institutions on building out like private chains and things like that. And what she was saying to me is that like it's really hard to get answers about what exactly you need in order to effectively set up and run. Like I understand I need a node, and but what are the other pieces that are actually
Mhm.
required? Because what they don't want is get halfway through and then realize, oh, we also need this and we also need this. And so I think that there's just still kind of a lack of prescriptive, authoritative information that says this is what the whole picture looks like. You get your node with you've got Catalyst for management, you've got Noves Data App for like visibility into the data, but what are the other things that also have to go along with that? And they just want to be able to see the whole picture and have some confidence that that includes everything that they need. And I think that if we want to kind of accelerate the pace that people are able to adopt, I think that we've got to get that nailed down.
Yeah, I fully agree with you on that. And we are, let's say, fighting the same educational problem on like how to make sure the institutions that are joining network they understand the full picture from the very first, like from the node to the, let's say, production application and the data layer for it. Again, I'm really happy about the upcoming partnership, so we are bringing the at least two of the pieces together.
Exactly.
Yeah, less to worry about. Okay, the next question I would like to ask, this is, I hope it will spike some social media views and mentions. So, blockchain data sucks. This is the tagline you shared from the company page. I think you even use it as a company tagline at some point. So, I just
Yeah.
want to know why the blockchain data sucks and what was the worst piece of the blockchain data you've personally had to fight with. Like, what was the moment that you thought about this statement?
Well, the statement came from an unending series of moments because like there's a never-ending stream of situations where you're like, ah, God, this is just so bad. Um, and I think, it's a funny tagline and it gets people's attention and that's great, but also it stems from the reality that blockchains are not designed for readability, right? They're designed to be able to write data, they're designed to be able to relatively efficiently store data, and they're designed for ability of that data, and they're not designed for efficient retrieval and querying of that data. And so I think from that, the majority of why dealing with blockchain data sucks kind of like flows. But then, of course, people come along and like complicate the process on top. And I mean, just to give you a couple examples, like out of Canton, like an easy example is if you want to use the built-in APIs and you want to fetch the history of a particular party, that goes from the beginning of that goes in a forward direction only. That's just it. So you can go to the beginning of time and you can get the first transaction and you can start scooching forward and you can eventually get to the data you want. You can also choose to jump to a particular point, but that particular point isn't specified
Mm,
by like time, right?
okay.
Like you just got to know the cursor location of where you want to go. And so if you're trying to find January's transactions, that's just like not a thing. But it's a totally normal thing that you would want to do, but it's just not really reasonably possible to do. And looking outside of that, some other things we had this whole trend for a while where people were doing these tokens they're called reflection tokens, where every time someone trades one, a tiny percent was like distributed to everybody else that had the token or things like that. But those distributions weren't actual token movements. They were recorded. They were actually recorded in a transaction. And so if you added up all the transfers, they wouldn't tie out to the actual balance that you had at the time. And same thing with like tokens that accumulate like interest at some rate, or there's just all kinds of scenarios where the logical way of following the data doesn't end up tying out to what the actual results are. Or people that you clone an existing contract, and then you leave all the function names the way they are, but you change what the one function does. And so now there's like an expectation built up over history that this function does a particular thing, but you've just built your own implementation without changing the name of the function. And those kinds of things just make data analysis extremely difficult because you're not getting what you expect out of data.
Okay, for me, this all sounds more fun than complicated, but I guess, yeah, for you, it's not that funny. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Last question, I know, and we heard that you are fighting a lot of series even right now and trying to improve the overall data layer on Canton, but are there any particular products, features, what to expect next from Novus in the coming months or year?
Yeah, so the where we're headed right now, like our main roadmap item is now that we've got our arms around getting all of the data, we're working on how people can safely, effectively, and easily move that data
Mm-hmm.
outside of their own security boundary, right? Because inevitably this data needs to be shared, whether that's you need to be able to prove what your total supply of your asset that you're issuing is, or whether you need to be able to move last year's data to your auditor, or any number of other scenarios where you have your private data and you need to get it to someone else, but you don't want to open yourself up to a massive set of risks of like how that data is getting there and who has access to it and that sort of thing. So we're working on a secure transport mechanism that will allow requests for private data to be handled smoothly and securely, and allow people in the ecosystem to choose what data is moved to what parties and under what terms.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so pretty excited for that layer. And I think that's it for today. We'll wrap it up. Ben, thank you so much for joining me. This was Canton Insiders. I think there are pretty enough conversations happening around institutions joining the Canton Network, assets moving on chain, and so on. But I really enjoy like talking with real builders and operators of the network and checking what they've got in their stack. So the data app is pretty amazing. The upcoming features also. So this one's Ben Roy for Canton Insiders. I will link all the links to Novus and Ben in the description, as well as to the Intellect EU and Catalyx. And stay tuned for the next episodes. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great talking to you.
Yeah, likewise.